Tonight, as the death toll from the H1N1 flu rises, especially among children and teenagers, doctors race to figure out why some patients get so sick so fast. I'm Jeff Glor. Also tonight, the runaway balloon. The Colorado father at the center of this strange story promised a big announcement today. We'll tell you more on what happened. And the young and jobless. The recession is hitting one group of Americans especially hard. Even a college diploma can't get them in the door.
This is the CBS Evening News with Jeff Glor.
And good evening. We begin tonight with more on the H1N1 flu epidemic, which the World Health Organization says is strikingly different from seasonal flu outbreaks because it hits the young so hard. 11 children under the age of 18 have died of the flu in the United States this week. That is 86 young people who've died so far this year of H1N1, half of them in the last month and a half. And it comes at the same time the CDC says there will not be as much vaccine available by the end of this month as they first expected. Hari Srinivasan has more.
A school bus full of mourners came to say goodbye to 14-year-old Michelle Faley, a high school freshman in the Chicago suburb of Naperville.
Michelle was just a really fun girl. She loved helping out everyone. She always welcomed everyone with a smile.
Faley died from the H1N1 virus and a previously undiagnosed heart condition. But in San Diego, California, an otherwise healthy 5-year-old girl in kindergarten also died from the virus.
The problem was her heart kept stopping. She kept needing more and more rounds of medicine, and eventually it became very clear that her heart just wasn't going to work.
The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention found about half the people hospitalized for swine flu had no other serious health problems. And the World Health Organization says only 1% of patients infected with H1N1 are hospitalized. Of those, 12 to 30% need intensive care, and 15 to 40% of that group die.
I wish that we were able to provide vaccine all through the weekend and into next week. I just wish that the supply met the demand.
Long lines around the country for the H1N1 vaccine may continue until next month.
Our doctor's office said probably another 4 weeks before they get it.
Because vaccine manufacturers are experiencing production delays.
Eventually, anyone who wants to be vaccinated will be able to be vaccinated.
For now, hospitals are trying to make sure their workers are vaccinated.
We have to protect our workforce in hospitals. We have to be there if people get sick from flu or other things to help them.
Even with 41 states now reporting widespread H1N1 outbreaks, researchers still don't know why this strain of the flu is hurting children so lethally. Normally, 95% of flu fatalities are 65 and older. Jeff?
All right, Hari Srinivasan tonight. Hari, thank you. The Pakistani military today launched a long-awaited offensive against Taliban militants in the rugged South Waziristan region on the Afghan border. The offensive by some 30,000 troops follows a series of daring Taliban attacks on army headquarters and other targets that left more than 175 dead. In Afghanistan, the U.S. military today reported the deaths of 3 more American soldiers in 2 separate bombings. That raises the 2-day toll to 7 and the toll so far this month to 28. And with President Hamid Karzai apparently balking today at the idea of an election runoff, the debate over U.S. troop strength is only intensifying this weekend. We get more now from Chief White House correspondent Chip Reed.
In southern Afghanistan this week, U.S. Marines were on the hunt for Taliban insurgents. General Stanley McChrystal says he needs 40,000 more U.S. troops to defeat the Taliban, pushing the total to 108,000. Some analysts say if McChrystal doesn't get what he needs, the Taliban will invite al-Qaeda to return to the safe havens in Afghanistan where they planned the 9/11 attacks.
I think it would be a mistake to conclude somehow that if the Taliban came back to power in Afghanistan, that this time around they would be unfriendly to al-Qaeda.
But other analysts disagree, noting that all but about 100 al-Qaeda have moved across the border into Pakistan. Mark Weisbrot of the liberal-leaning group Just Foreign Policy says there's no reason to believe the Taliban would allow al-Qaeda to return. He also says that with casualties mounting in Afghanistan, at least 250 Americans have been killed this year, American support is fading.
It's the 9th year, and people are tired of it. And if we're talking about democracy and promoting democracy, well, democracy begins at home. You know, American people want us out.
All those arguments are a reflection of what President Obama is hearing from top advisors in a series of lengthy meetings in the Situation Room. And now there's another major problem for the president to wrestle with. Afghan President Hamid Karzai is resisting calls for a runoff to settle the disputed August election. Democratic Senator John Kerry in Afghanistan this weekend was interviewed for tomorrow's Face the Nation on CBS.
I don't see how President Obama can make a decision about the committing of our additional forces or even the further fulfillment of our mission that's here today without an adequate government in place or knowledge about what that government's going to be.
Some critics say the president is taking too long to make his decision, but the White House says so much is at stake, it's vital to get it right. A decision is expected in the next few weeks. Chip Reed, CBS News, the White House.
The administration also announced yesterday that the federal budget deficit jumped to more than $1.4 trillion in the fiscal year that ended last month. That is 3 times as big as the year before and the largest shortfall relative to the size of the economy since 1945. To help us put that and the rest of the week in focus, we're joined in Washington tonight by CBS News political analyst John Dickerson. John, let's start by talking about that rather large deficit number. How much does this complicate the administration's ambitious goals?
It's a very bad number, and it does complicate things. It's not a new number. We've known that the deficits were going to be very big, but each time we learn just how big, it complicates the fact that the administration is still spending money, not just on the health care plan. The administration says that's paid for, but there are other elements, extending unemployment benefits, also giving $250 to seniors, and also fixing a part of past budget efforts to pay doctors more than they're supposed to get paid. And that's a key here, which is that they're undoing things from the past that were meant to keep the budget in check, which suggests that any promises they're making now about fiscal discipline have to be taken with a big grain of salt.
Okay, so John, you talked about the health insurance debate there, and let's talk about that for a second, because President Obama, in his address today, really went after the health insurance lobby, saying they'll do anything to kill reform. What's behind his attack today, and where does the health reform debate stand as we head into this week?
It really was striking. Sharp words from the president. What's going on is the health insurance companies have pushed back against reform. And now the White House is using the health insurance companies as a boogeyman. And this is useful politically for the president because Democrats are split over reform, moderates versus liberals in the party. And what the president's doing is saying, hey, let's stop debating among ourselves. Let's all realize that the common enemy here is the insurance companies. The only slight downside for the president is that as he beats up on the insurance companies, a lot of his supporters will say, well, you know, the best way to go after them is to have a government-run public option. And that may be something the president can't deliver.
All right, we'll see what happens. Our CBS News political analyst John Dickerson joining us from Washington tonight. John, as always, thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
Still ahead on tonight's CBS Evening News, swimming to the North Pole, what one expedition learned about global warming. And when we come back, the latest on the story of that rogue balloon. The more we learn about Thursday's balloon escapade over Colorado, the more puzzling it becomes. Here's Rick Salinger of CBS affiliate KCNC-TV in Denver.
If there was any doubt, the drama surrounding Richard Heaney and this week's high-altitude balloon chase could get more bizarre. This morning's brief news conference answered that.
I don't know how to, quite frankly, answer any of them other than I've got a box.
After earlier telling reporters to expect a big announcement, Heaney instead said he'd return later to respond to written questions. But he did answer one.
Absolutely no hoax. I want your questions in the box.
Questions of whether the family made up the story about 6-year-old Falcon floating off in the makeshift aircraft Thursday gained traction after the boy was found hiding in the garage and said this on CNN hours later.
We did this for the show.
That prompted Larimer County investigators to re-interview the parents today.
We're just looking at essentially putting those last pieces of the puzzle together to make sense of what happened.
Authorities say they still believe the family's story, pointing to the 911 tape.
We looked everywhere, and then my son just said, being terrified. He said, yeah, he went inside just before it went off.
And the anxiety many of them saw on the family's faces during the high-altitude drama at 8,000 feet. But the escapade has prompted Child Services to launch its own investigation, and neighbors are growing frustrated by the media attention.
he definitely likes the attention. I got to say that.
On Friday, the Heenies released this home video, taken just before the balloon took off on its 50-mile journey to dampen criticism. But other videos on YouTube revealed Richard Heeni's aspirations to be famous.
Get here! Put the windows up, guys!
Some show him taking his children on dangerous storm-chasing missions.
Yeah! You tell her!
And the family's 2 appearances on a network reality show have given skeptics more fuel.
Friends are telling me they're saying this and that. I have no idea what the news is saying.
For now, there continue to be more questions than answers. And if anyone thought Richard Heenie would provide some today, they were left a bit deflated. Rick Salinger for CBS News, Denver.
Just ahead on tonight's CBS Evening News, a crash course in unemployment economics for the college class of 2009. The tough economic times are hitting young job seekers especially hard. Overall, the unemployment rate is 9.8%, but for 16 to 24-year-olds who are no longer in school, it has soared to more than 18%. Compare that with 13% a year ago. And having a college degree is little help these days, as we hear from Ben Tracy.
Do you want room for milk?
The campus coffee shop has allowed Elise Manbert to help work her way through college at UCLA.
There you go. Have a good day.
The only problem? She graduated 5 months ago.
Both my parents had jobs when they left college, and so I kind of always expected that was going to be the same situation for me.
What she didn't plan on was hitting one of the worst job markets for college graduates in a generation. Now, even as the economy begins to recover, job creation is lagging.
A couple of my friends have unpaid internships. A couple are working at just part-time. A lot of them are in coffee shops.
2 years ago, the unemployment rate for 20 to 24-year-olds with bachelor's degrees was just 2.2%. Now it's more than 4 times that at 9.3%. Kathy Sims heads UCLA's Career Center and says this is the worst job market she has seen in her 32-year career. Next year could be worse.
The class of 2010 will not just be competing with itself. It'll be competing with some of the class of 2008 and many of the class of 2009.
Compounding the problem is the huge amount of debt students have when they graduate. The average undergraduate credit card balance is $3,000, and the 60% of students who need to borrow money to get through school end up owing nearly $23,000.
At the beginning of November, I have to start paying back roughly about $20,000 to $25,000 worth of loans, which I don't know how I'm going to do that.
Kyle Voigt graduated a year ago, hoping to get a job in advertising. He moved back in with his dad and has yet to find a job.
And at this point, will you take anything?
Anything.
Kyle is now considering joining the Navy. Meanwhile, the Peace Corps, AmeriCorps, and Teach for America have all had record numbers of applicants.
Have a good day.
Elise Manbert is still optimistic.
I just feel like my personal luck has to improve.
And that she can finally graduate to a full-time job. Ben Tracy, CBS News, Los Angeles.
In Brazil, dramatic pictures as a police helicopter crashed and burned after being hit by gunfire during a shootout between Rio de Janeiro drug gangs. 2 of the people on board were killed. Coming up on tonight's CBS Evening News, they are fun, they're addictive, but could they be hurting your kids? A medical study out tonight raises new concerns about a modern childhood mainstay, the video game. An 11-year-old game player inadvertently triggered that study when he complained to his father, a doctor, about a nagging pain in his thumbs and wrist. The resulting survey of almost 200 grade schoolers found nearly 12% of them experienced pain in the fingers and wrist from playing video games. The study found the worst pain was in players who used the Nintendo Wii, even though they were logging fewer gaming hours. Nintendo does warn on its website and on the games themselves that playing video games can make muscles and joints hurt, and that players should take breaks after every hour of play. In another study out today, researchers found a link between gum disease and rheumatoid arthritis among non-smokers. That study says that people with moderate to severe periodontal disease are twice as likely to develop rheumatoid arthritis as those with mild gum disease or none at all. It has been a widely watched court case about an iconic image of President Obama during the 2008 presidential campaign. The Associated Press has long claimed that artist Shepard Fairey used one of its photos as the basis of the popular Hope poster, which is a copyright violation. Fairey denied it and sued the AP. Now he's admitted he did use that photo and should have come forward earlier. The 39-year-old fairy is a Los Angeles street artist. Next up on tonight's CBS Evening News, an up-close look at the shrinking polar ice cap. Few places on Earth are more worried about the effects of climate change than the low-lying Maldive Islands in the Indian Ocean. In a symbolic call for action today, cabinet members put on diving suits to meet on the bottom of a lagoon. They worry the islands could be completely underwater within a century. With a Copenhagen climate change summit only 2 months away now, scientists have released disturbing new findings, they say, about the melting of the North Polar ice. Elizabeth Palmer has more on that.
Last spring, the Catlin Arctic Survey team set out to walk and sometimes swim just over 600 miles to the North Pole. Their aim, to collect information on sea ice. But almost immediately, their radar and a sled loaded with water testing equipment failed. And they had to scale back and simply measure ice thickness the old-fashioned way. In most places, it was barely 6 feet thick, half what they'd expected. By late spring, the ice was on the move. One night so violently,
I'm afraid we're going to have to move camp.
Finally, plagued with frostbite and frozen sleeping bags, they gave up, only halfway to the pole.
We realized during the course of the expedition that we would have to let the pole go, focus on the science.
This week in London, Catlin released its results, fending off accusations that such a flawed expedition couldn't produce good science. Catlin says for scientists who rely on satellite or submarine data, its measurements are unique.
The scientists really have a lack of what you might call relatively accurate, absolute measurements, what they would call direct observations made from the surface, at the surface, down through the snow, ice cover and the ice layer below.
Eminent climate scientists agree the data supports a growing consensus that the polar ice cap is in dramatic retreat.
The conclusions from this work and from other measurements that have been done and from new models are that the summer ice will disappear within 20 to 30 years and a lot of it will be gone within 10 years.
The good news is that will open up new shipping lanes. The bad news is that polar ice helps keep the planet cool by reflecting the sun. Once it's gone, it's likely global warming will speed up. Elizabeth Palmer, CBS News, London.
That is the CBS Evening News tonight. Later on CBS, 48 Hours Mystery. Russ Mitchell will be here tomorrow night. I'm Jeff Glor, CBS News in New York. Good night.